Today we're going to quickly learn how to cultivate our own yeast, just like you see here, so that you can make this loaf of bread after SHTF, right after the channel intro.
Shots fired! Shots fired! Shots fired! Ambulance en route.
Welcome to this channel. This channel is all about learning how to prepare for when the dark times come and the grocery stores are stripped bare. And this channel is all about prepping for those dark days while still retaining our integrity and our honor. And today we're going to see step by step how you can make your own off-grid yeast so that you can make a loaf of bread just like this without using gas or electricity. And the reason why that you, as a prepper, want to know how to make your own yeast is that after SHTF you probably won't be able to buy yeast. And you also can't exactly stockpile yeast because it doesn't have a very long shelf life. So if you are a prepper that wants to be able to make bread after SHTF, here's how to make your own off-grid yeast. Okay, now here's what I do to successfully cultivate wild yeast every time that I do it. So let's get started. Okay, first things that you're going to need is at least a minimum quart-sized jar, a measuring cup, and this 1/4 cup measuring cup worked perfect for me, and some filtered water. And please don't use tap water because the chlorine in it may kill the yeast that you're wanting to cultivate. And last but not least, some flour. Now I like to mill down my own flour, but you can use any unbleached wheat flour. And what you're making here is actually called a sourdough yeast starter. And it's some of this that you'll actually use in place of the granulated yeast that you buy at the store. And now since I've milled down a couple of cups of flour, now I'm just going to mix together the flour and the water into a mixture that's equal to weight. And what I have found to be equal in weight is 3 scoops of flour to 2 scoops of water. And also, while I'm using a 1/4 cup measuring cup, you can obviously use a larger one. I'm just showing you what has worked great for me. And now I'm just going to mix it enough to make sure that it's completely mixed. And your result should be the same consistency as a really thick pancake batter. And now what I'm going to do is put a breathable lid on it by using a paper towel. And you can use whatever kind of breathable lid that you want. You just want to let air in and keep bugs out. And now I'm just going to leave it on the countertop for the yeast that's naturally inside there to start cultivating. I'm not going to refrigerate it or stir it or anything else. I'm just going to let it sit on the counter for approximately 24 hours before touching it again tomorrow. Okay, now it's about 24 hours later and on the second day. Now all I'm going to do today is feed it by adding 3 more scoops of the flour and 2 more scoops of the water to it. And then I'm going to mix it up really good. And then put the lid back on it, and then just set it aside again until tomorrow. And now here it is on the third day, and we can see by the air bubbles that the natural yeast is already activating, which is actually kind of surprising because it usually takes me about 5 days before it usually kicks in. And as the yeast activates, your yeast starter will naturally start very slowly rising and then falling after each time that you feed it, and that's what you're wanting. So at this point, if I were just to keep adding more water and flour to it each time I go to feed it, then the mixture would get too full and would bubble over the top of the jar. So from here on out, every day, I'm going to take away 3 scoops of the mixture and then replace it with 3 new scoops of flour and 2 scoops of water. And then each time I will just simply mix it up really good and put it aside again. But again, doing this is called feeding it because it's giving the yeast new flour to feed on. Now with the yeast mixture that I've already taken out, I can choose to just throw it away if I want to, or I can use it to start a second yeast starter, or I can give it to someone else who can then use it to jumpstart their own yeast starter, just like how the Amish friendship bread works. Okay, now each new day over the next several days will be exactly the same. I'll feed it by removing 3 scoops out of the jar and then adding 3 new scoops of flour and 2 scoops of the unfiltered water and then mixing it. And actually, it's ready to be used now to make bread since it's remained bubbly for the past couple of days, and it's obvious that the yeast has really taken hold. And you'll also find that after several days of repeating this, but as your wild yeast is getting more mature, the more of a sourdough smell that you're going to start smelling also. And if you find that you have a little excess water that's kind of floating on top of the mixture, it's not a big deal, and that's actually called hooch, and you can just pour it off. Now if you make bread on an almost daily basis, then you won't have to discard that 3 scoops of flour each time that you feed it, because those scoops that you would have thrown away will actually go into your bread dough instead. But if you're not going to be making bread at least a couple of times a week, then after several days and after your yeast starter is firmly established, then you can just simply put it into your refrigerator, and what this does is basically it slows it down. And then once a week you can take that out of your refrigerator and then take out half of it and then mix in new flour and water in it to keep it alive and going. And if your first attempt at making yeast fails, just like mine did, don't get discouraged and just try it again. So now, since our yeast starter is firmly established, now we're going to see how to actually make a loaf of bread using it. Now you're going to want a little over 3 cups of flour. 3 cups of it will be for the bread dough, and the extra will be to sprinkle on the counter when I form the dough. So I first add the 3 cups of flour, then I add 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and then I'm going to add about 2 scoops or about 1/2 cup of the homemade yeast, since I'm using 3 cups of flour. And then I'm going to add about 1.5 cups of water. And now I'm just going to stir it up really well so that all of the ingredients are thoroughly mixed together. And because this homemade yeast doesn't work as fast as store-bought yeast, I'm going to cover it and let it sit in a cabinet for about 12 hours to let it slowly rise. And now it's the next day, and you can see that the dough has raised to about twice the original size. And now I'm just going to knock it down and sprinkle a little extra flour on my workspace and then quickly form it into a loaf. Now I'm going to put that dough into a bread pan, and while I should have greased the pan, I tried an experiment of dusting it with flour. But take it from me, a greased pan is better. But now I'm just going to put some slices on top of the dough for fanciness and cover it and let it re-rise for an hour. And now I'm going to put it into my preheated Dutch oven for a little bit over a half hour to 45 minutes. But you can cook this in your oven if you want to. But you can usually tell when bread is finished cooking because it will have a golden brown look to it. And it will also have a hollow sound to it when you thump it with your finger. Now you can probably notice that it's gotten dark outside now. And I've also let the bread get just a little too done, but it's not the end of the world. But now I'm just going to remove it from the bread pan, and I'm going to let it sit for an hour before I slice into it. And now, since it's been an hour, let's see what it looks and tastes like. This stuff is really kick butt. If you like sourdough bread, then you will absolutely love this. And if you would like to learn how to make bread in a fire pit using a Dutch oven, then click on the link that should be appearing in the upper right hand corner of the screen just about now to learn more about that. And after SHTF, you may not have electricity or gas or even wood to cook with. So to see how important a solar oven is for preppers, then click on the video link that should be appearing on the right side of the screen just about now. Anyways folks, if you made it this far, hey, thank you very much for watching, and I pray that you have a good night.